Should I stay or should I go? This is definitely a video for the matters of the heart. This video is for you if you're currently in a relationship and some parts of you are underlyingly questioning if this is really it. This video is for you if there are some overlying parts that are really actively questioning if this is it. This video is for you if you are maybe still going through a breakup, or you recently went through a breakup and you're still processing. And this video is also for you if you're single. The reason why I'm making this video is because in the last weeks, there was really a theme that I've been seeing in my sessions. I worked with women that suffered through marriages for 20 years, trying to stick with the marriage because it would have been the right thing. I've been in sessions with some of you that are currently kind of like dating and are in the first months of a relationship and or kind of like the first steps of dating and questioning if this is it. And I've been working with some of you that have been in relationships for a couple years, and the question of is this really the right choice is creating inner warfare. We are not just breaking up with the present, and we're not just changing the past, we also nourish a future potential. So when we go through a breakup, or when we go through contemplating a breakup, it's so heavy because we're taking energy out of this future timeline. We're breaking up with a whole potential life that we've already built on some dimension. And as we are elevating, and a lot of you, I mean, that's why you're here, you're constantly growing and you're constantly becoming more of your truest essence, more of your God essence, or more so the vessel that can hold more of God's light and God's truth. And so you're elevating at a very fast speed. So it is quite normal that the question of is this relationship still the right thing arises. Just because you're progressing and you're elevating so fast and you're changing belief systems and you're changing paradigms within. And so maybe the choice you made 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if the choice was made from a version of you that you no longer are, and maybe that you no longer trust, it is very natural to question if this is the right relationship. Let's get into the question that often comes with that. Am I delusional? Am I delusional for wanting my desires to be met? And there's this thing, right? When we're in truth, the gap between our heart's desire and that desire fulfilled creates almost like this beautiful anticipation, this beautiful excitement. So having a desire and having that desire not met is actually, it creates almost like this foreplay, right? When we're in our healthy, trusting system, it just creates excitement and hopeful expectation. Now, when we're in a relationship and we feel like this relationship just cannot fulfill this desire, the gap between desire and having our desire met can be really, really painful, because it almost feels like this hopeless desire, my heart longs for it, but I don't believe I will ever find this in this relationship. I don't believe I will ever get to experience this. And if that is the undertone, that's really sad. Now, it doesn't mean that all of your desires are meant to be fulfilled, but all of your God-given desires are meant to be fulfilled. And so now, are you delusional? It depends on who you're asking, and it depends on where your desires are coming from. Now, if the desires come from your heart, and usually they do, then you deserve to have them fulfilled. In fact, not only do you deserve to have them fulfilled, the fulfillment of them and the journey to fulfillment of these desires is your ikigai. It's your reason for being here. And the way you discern if something is pure and if something is a desire that was given to you by God, is how much inner alchemy is connected to that. So we'll get to that in a second. So let's start off with this whole thing of, am I delusional? You know, do I want too much? Is it just maybe that nothing will ever be good enough for me? Valid question. Valid question. And especially when we, you know, go through trauma, or there's unresolved trauma, like setting the bar really high can be a means for us to never really fully give ourselves to a relationship. So again, I cannot discern that from here. I'm talking to more than just one. I'm generalizing. So especially for those of us who do a lot of shadow work or who do a lot of transformational work, you know, there's this added question of, wait, is this a reflection? You know, do I have to just do more inner work? Do I have to do deeper shadow work? Do I have to extract more truth, right? All of these questions, they can add. And some of us stay in quite toxic situations or just really mediocre situations. They don't even have to be toxic, but sometimes they're just really mediocre, and we stay in mediocre situations for too long because we have this inner work thing going on. That's true for some, that's not true for everyone. Just wanted to add that. So, am I delusional? Let's go back to that. Sorry, I'm jumping. You know how it goes. If you've been watching this channel, you know, like I open certain tabs and I let you fill in the tabs, right? I'm just throwing things out so you can contemplate them. Depends on who you're asking. If you're delusional or not, depends on where it's coming from and who you're asking. So if you're talking to a stoic guy that does not meet the standards, or a stoic guy on the internet, they will probably tell you, yes, you're delusional. If you're sharing your heart's desires with women of your family or old friends of yours, or just women that have settled for something less than fulfilling in their relationship and in life in general, yes, they will probably tell you you're delusional. Now, the question is that a good resource? Right? Is a woman that has never even touched her desires the right resource for that? Of course, that's a hypothetical question. No, she's not. So is your current partner that in a fight tells you that you'll never meet a man as good as him, is he a good resource? No, probably not. Is a random stranger on the internet that would probably not meet your standards a good resource? No, he's probably not. But what's a good resource is your heart. Your heart is a good resource. And if your desires stem from your heart, well, that's something that you can trust 100% of the time. And when people look at your desires like they're delusional, these people don't really understand where desires come from. Or men believe that women just scroll through Instagram and see a picture of a couple that looks super happy, and now they just like raise the bar for their standards like 100% and created desires. And maybe that's true for some. That is usually not true for a woman that does some self-interrogation. You feel me? And yeah, we're all guilty of that. I'm not saying that never happened. Like, I've definitely scrolled through Instagram and social media and saw a couple, and I saw them travel around the world, and I saw them build empires together, and I saw them looking freaking sexy as fuck. And I'm like, oh my God, I want that, right? We're all guilty of that. But just because I'm looking at that and I'm like, I want that, that doesn't mean that now all of a sudden I'm questioning my whole relationship, and that isn't actually what created the desire in me. And so I think people that have never gone through the inner alchemy that it takes to get to your heart's desire, they think that you just scroll through Instagram and you see some fancy stuff, and now all of a sudden you're like, that's what I want, and that is my standard. When, if we're real, that's not how that works. And the desires that come from your heart are usually desires that you had to extract throughout a lot of pain. Like if I look into my heart and how my desires were birthed, they all came from a moment of devastation, a moment where it was this gut-wrenching pain of not having my desires met. And in the midst of this unworthiness and being beaten down by life, by myself, by relationships, by this feeling of guilt, unworthiness, shame, in the midst of that darkness, there was this little light that was like, I deserve better than this. And in the midst of this darkness, life will always ask you the question, and that is, how much more are you going to tolerate until you realize who you are and that you're purity and that you never deserved this in the first place. And so that, my love, is the moment where your desire is born from. That's where your standards are born from. So don't forget where they come from, because it's easy for people to like look at you and brush it off, or look at you like you have these high ass standards. But where do they come from? And I can tell you from my experience, they come from moments where I felt like worthless. They come from moments where I felt like I deserved nothing but like lifelessness, like numbness or pain. It was either that or that, like numbness and lifelessness and mediocre gray zones or absolute pain. And so that's where my desires were born. My desires were born in the moments when I said, no, she deserves better than that. Actually, she's a really good person. She doesn't deserve that. She deserves better than that. And so I know the same goes for you. Your desires were born from the pain of all the moments where your desires weren't met. There's this fire that's burning in your heart, this desire for whatever it is, for deep intimacy, for romance, for being met on the deepest level, for having someone wanting the same future as you, for having someone that's as ambitious as you, having someone that's as loving as you. Like all of these things, these are not irrational, delusional desires. They come from your heart. How could they ever be delusional? So when you ask yourself that question, ask yourself, how did you have to extract these desires? And yes, while we're all guilty of like scrolling through IG and like being like, I want that, that's precious, that's sweet, that doesn't make you actually like change your standards. So we're all guilty of that. But your true heart's desires, they don't come from Instagram. They come from the tears you've cried in the past and all of the times where your desires weren't met, or you didn't even allow yourself to have desires, right? Because you thought, well, that's just not for me. So when someone projects that onto you, when someone looks at you like you're entitled for having desires, or you come from this entitlement, it's usually because they themselves haven't gone, like I said, through the inner alchemy. And the inner alchemy is surrendering to your desires, which isn't always a fun process. In fact, it's a very painful process. And it's something that I had to surrender throughout my life so many times, I cannot count it. And if I look back, I'm from Germany, small town in Germany. If I look into my past friendships or the old circles I come from, my old friends or the people that I grew up with, they haven't gone through that pain, right? So a lot of them looked at me like I was entitled when they didn't see the heartbreak that was connected to that. Like saying no to a situation that isn't bad, it isn't really good, but it isn't bad, isn't easy. Like not knowing what's on the other end of it making a decision that no one else has made before you, at least not in your surrounding, is hard. Like, listening to your heart sometimes makes you feel crazy, because a lot of people don't listen to their heart. And for me, it was never really a question. I wasn't allowed to settle for anything that wouldn't have me tune into my highest potential. Because not only would I squander my life, but it's not even about that. Like, I have opportunities that my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother never had. So settling for something that doesn't fulfill my desires, my heart's desires that were given to me by God, settling for something that isn't like touching that, would also be like wasting all of these women's lives. They struggled through life so that here I am right now as the only woman in my bloodline able to like create a different life. And if I settled for anything mediocre, or if I tried to ignore my heart's desires, even though it creates discomfort in the moment, right? Your heart's desires won't always feel comfortable. Your heart's desires and surrendering to them will probably create a lot of discomfort in a lot of moments. But to ignore that would be to let down all of these women. So there was just a force that wouldn't allow me to do that. And so that might go for you. Maybe you're not meant for mediocre. Maybe you're not meant for merely okay. Not for your own sake and not in a relationship. This is not this whole like, you're a woman, you can have it all, you get to have it all. It doesn't come from that place. It comes from something more real. And you get to experience that real. And so, for those of you that still feel unworthy or to have a beautiful relationship, just me telling you you're worthy is not gonna cut it. And someone just recently asked, how do you find your worthiness? I think that's a whole topic for itself. But if you observe yourself through the eyes of God for long enough, you'll see who you really are. And that might not be a very tangible advice, but again, if you feel unworthiness, or if you've just never experienced a love relationship that is fulfilling to you, and if you don't even allow yourself that desire, and there are some of us, right? I want you to do a little thought experiment. Maybe you don't feel worthy for this fulfilling life, this fulfilling partnership, right? Because it's like, it's not just the partnership. If you don't feel like you deserve this loving, intimate relationship, you also probably don't feel like you deserve wealth and you deserve a fulfilling path, and you, right? It's like it comes with all of these things. Do a thought experiment. Maybe you feel like you don't deserve that, but what about your children? Whether your children actually live already, or maybe we're talking about your future children or hypothetical children. What do you believe is good for them? Right? Maybe that will change the way you pick a relationship. Because what might be okay enough for you, is that really good enough in a father figure? Is that relationship that you're currently in, whether it's the father of the children or whether it could be the potential father of your future children, is this good enough? For you, maybe yes it is, because you've been used to kind of like the lowest standards or mediocre standards, whatever. But ask yourself the question, is this good enough for my children? Or are the choices that I'm making when it comes to men, is this really good enough for the children that I might have in the future, or that I maybe already have? Because there is nothing that will influence your children as much as your relationship with their father or the man that's in your life. the way your children observe your relationship with another person will impact them in countless ways and deeper than probably anything else. So, for your children's sake, what would a beautiful, desirable relationship look like? Because just good enough is maybe not just good enough for your children. And if you ask yourself, am I delusional? Well, what's delusional? Is there really such a thing as too good of a father and too good of a mother? So maybe reframing that and looking at it from that perspective might give you some perspective.